Throughout the following solitary hours, David sat at the bar and drank pint after pint of beer. He was losing track of time when another work of art floated into his mind. He sang a song, the effect of which turned out to be so mystical and haunting that he couldn't help but be more than pleased with it. It went, "Didn't know what time it was, the lights were low, oh. There's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he'll blow our minds.
There's a starman waiting in the sky. He's told us not to blow it, 'cause he knows it's all worthwhile. He's hoping. Let the children use it. Let the children use it. Let all the children do get it.
After he finished playing, he pondered over his satisfaction for the song. He realised how tired he was feeling, though it was probably due to the beer and the emotional strain of the ridiculous argument with Jingfo. He lay down on their bed and fell asleep almost instantly. When he woke up during the night, he automatically reached out for her, but she wasn't there. Sickeningly, he remembered the night before and felt sorry for himself. His leg was still hurting from the fall in the pyramid. Now he also had a bloody hangover to deal with for the next few hours. He thought about Jingfo wandering the dark, deserted streets, and wished she was there to make love to, as they'd done the day before, when the spiders invaded their home, and when Jingfo had said she felt stunned for the rest of the day because of David's wild passion for her. He lit the gas lamp to pen a few more words about her, which he might even consider making into a brand new song, and called it Life on Mars. Thinking of his beloved girl, he wrote, "It's a god-awful small affair to the girl with the mousy hair.
But her mummy is yelling no, and her daddy has told her to go. But her friend is nowhere to be seen. Now she walks through her sunken dream to the seat with the clearest view, and she's hooked to the silver screen. But the film is a sad thing for she's lived it 10 times or more. She could spit in the eyes of fools if they ask her to focus on sailors fighting in the dance hall. Oh man, look at those cavemen go.
David felt quite worried about Jingfo's whereabouts, but knew there was no point in setting out to look for her until daybreak, and depressingly realised his search would also be much hindered by his bad leg. Jingfo was wandering the dark streets with no inkling that David was at home in the pub kitchen, playing Life on Mars on his old guitar and dedicating the words to her. She was trying to make her way to the centre of Stranville, as instinctively she thought there may be some chance of finding other human life there. From the dim light of the moon and strange cloud formations in the still hazy atmosphere, she was just about able to see where she was going and do her best avoiding the enormous rats that seemed to inhabit every dustbin and garden. She was feeling dehydrated, but knew from David's survival management tips that she shouldn't attempt to drink any water from the river, as it was probably contaminated. When she reached the town's central cobble square, there wasn't a soul in sight. Feeling a few drops of rainfall on her forehead, Jingfo decided to take cover in an arched alleyway leading onto the square. It was the type of alley you would imagine Jack the Ripper making mincemeat out of his victims in, but Jingfo was too tired to care. To her surprise, there was a man huddled up inside the alley, and he looked as though he were praying or maybe just shivering. When he looked at Jingfo, she thought she recognised him as one of the characters from a childhood film she had watched many years ago. Maybe it was the sweet seller in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. But she was in no mood to be fussy and instantly struck up a conversation with him. He was wearing jeans and a hoodie and had the longest, thinnest face she'd ever seen, topped by a hooked nose. He said his name was Klutzo and he had just escaped from a formatting centre. He told her he didn't hope to be safe for long, as the Starmen had many capacities, and finding him would be a piece of cake to them. Jingfo was curious about the formatting centre, and Klutso told her about the food, which was just a pill you took every day, and that once you were formatted you only thought about the task at hand and the duties the Starmen had assigned to you. For the sake of equality, everyone wore the same clothes. You were allowed to have sex twice a week because it was healthy, but no sincere attachments were encouraged, so the more often you changed your partner, the more the Starmen approved, and you gained extra points for this type of behaviour. Alcohol was allowed, but no singing, to which Jingfo remarked that her boyfriend, David, sings every day, as he is a musician. Klutso warned her there would definitely be none of that nonsense once they were in the formatting centre, and that all writing and poetry of any type of creative expression was strictly frowned upon by the Starmen. After chatting with Klutso for about an hour, Jingfo was convinced the best thing to do would be to go home to David. Klutso said he could tell she really loved him, and after all, it wasn't like there was plenty of fish in the sea to choose from. He volunteered to accompany her back to Cook's, as long as she would offer him a pint, which she generously replied, "Yes, of course." In the meantime, and while they were making their way home, David had set out at the crack of dawn to search for Jingfo. He had no idea where she would have gone, and decided to head towards the river, as she must have a romantic association with it, on account of their many walks and passionate episodes on its obliging banks, where the sheer presence of the water contributed to their love-making, being even more intense than usual. Unlike Jingfo, he was equipped with water and basic supplies, but the bad leg made the walk tough going. Failing to find her at the river, he started to head towards the town centre, but unfortunately on a different route to the one that Klutso and his beloved Jingfo were taking home. 3 hours into his search, David sat down on the steps of an old house and rolled himself a cigarette. Fortunately, the town had many newsagents and shops, so he also had access to an endless supply of tobacco. As he sat smoking on the steps, David thought of some lines for a song. The screw is a tightening atrocity. I shake for the reeking flesh is as romantic as hell. The need to have seen it all, the voyeur of utter destruction. Glanced back at the foreboding tall building behind him. Maybe it was its age, but something about the place intrigued him, and he decided to take a look inside. The front door, which had once been painted green, was heavy, but quite easy to open. The hall was empty, except for a very old dressing table, with a round mirror at the top, and a mechanical clock on it, which was still ticking. But David didn't bother looking at the time, as it was now so insignificant in their postmodern world, and which he decided was not such a bad thing. There were 2 closed doors on either side of the hall, but David decided to take a look upstairs before exploring these rooms. As he climbed the creaky wooden stairs, he wondered if he should even be doing this, when he'd set out with the purpose of finding Jingfo. But curiosity had gotten the better of him, and he was here now. He thought he could hear footsteps behind him on his way upstairs, which made him somewhat uneasy, but put it down to his vivid imagination, which was also to blame for the lots of fear in actual unfearful situations. The first door he came to on the landing was painted black, and a small sign with the letter H hung on it. David cautiously opened the door, but as soon as it was ajar, he was overwhelmed by a force that pulled him into a tube-shaped room, and the door slammed shut behind him. A heavy, putrid smell hung in the darkness. David couldn't believe how big the place was or how high the ceiling. In the corner, he saw people with their bones showing through their translucent skin, who were wailing desperately and trying to pull at his legs. "Get us out of here, please!" they cried. But they scared the hell out of him, and David managed to get past them, though his feet didn't touch the floor, as the invisible force kept pulling him so that he just glided along. He was quite relieved not to be able to walk on the floor, as it seemed to be covered in brown earth, and huge centipedes that had bodies like snakes were quickly writhing everywhere beneath him. The physical pull on his body ceased suddenly when he came across a wizened old man dressed in a white gown, with a long beard, and whose skin was even whiter and more luminescent than David's own. He was sitting on a white throne and greeted David with the words,
"Hello, my name is Fear."
David was suddenly in the grips of a terror he had never known before. His body couldn't stop shaking, and sweat was dripping from every pore in his skin.
"I will make you doubt in yourself and force you to believe nothing is possible,"
continued the wizard-like man.
"You will never do or be anything because I will hold you back in every way and destroy whatever plans you think you have."
David looked on in pure disbelief as Fear started pulling his inside out of David's mouth, slowly easing out his long esophagus, followed by his entire stomach. Fear laughed evilly before throwing the whole slimy bundle back into David's mouth. His teeth were by now chattering too much to speak, but he didn't need to, as the invisible force pulled him along to meet the next persona, who was green. This was an ugly, large green and brown type of frog, sitting on a dark rock and holding a sickle. "Never play with envy," croaked the creature. David's mind suddenly clouded with darkness as he felt sick to the pit of his still delicate stomach. The creature said, "I will covet everything you have and everything about you. You'll never look good or be good at anything again. I will destroy your name and reputation until your name is mud, and everyone you know will continuously mock you." David's mind became darker than he had ever known, and he could tell there would be no way he would be able to hope in anything or for anything ever again in the future. Swiftly, David was involuntarily pulled onwards until he started being pulled sideways and upwards, where bats with human-like faces started biting him and tearing into his arms and body. He screamed in agony and got thrown to the floor to be slithered over and hissed to by the large centipedes. After this horrific physical and mental ordeal, David found himself in another cell, which was red, and the man sitting on the throne had blood-red pupils and was wearing a long dark cloak. "Ha! Say hello to death," cackled the man in a harrowing voice. He had a long, thin, callous face and displayed vicious, pointy teeth as he spoke from a mouth that looked as if it was filled with glowing hot coals. "Some call me the Shadow Man. Why do you think I brought you here, David?" David hung his head in misery and yearned to get out of this hellish place. The man with the hollow, minstrel-like features continued to speak with a cackling voice. "The H on the door stands for hell, David, and you should have known better than to come in here. Now, I will take your soul. Don't worry, our boy, it won't take long." The faint white light missing from behind this monster's dark silhouette was very striking, and David had the fleeting thought that if he ever survived this ordeal and made it big in the music industry, such an image would be very effective for an album cover. The Shadow Man started laughing in a very sinister way and the noise kept getting louder and louder until David's head felt like it was caving in. The stench of decay and sense of despair were overwhelming, and suddenly the floor beneath him caved in. David found himself in a deep hole and unable to move a limb, but for some reason could see that circled around the top of it he was being looked down on by the faces of many grotesque figures, some of whom he had just encountered, but were staring down at his corpse. David could make out daylight behind them, in the centre of their revolting silhouettes. In disbelief, he watched his own dismembered bodily pieces floating around in the coffin he was lying in. Sickeningly, he realized that the Shadow Man had not been joking about wanting to instantly release him from the duty of life. But inwardly he fought against death with all the strength he could muster. He was contemplating this very sickening experience when a huge white luminescent hand lowered itself into the grave, curled its fingers around David's lifeless body, and threw him towards the window, shattering the glass and hurtling him onto the lawn, as if he hadn't been through enough already. He knew he was now extremely injured, and had no idea just how long he lay on the lawn, but felt a wave of enormous relief for having escaped the den of darkness and iniquity. After some time, he managed to pick himself up and hobble home. The haunted house would forever be crossed off his list of possible future cosy homes when himself and Jingfo decided to get married and settle down.